I've had the privilege of sitting down with some incredible ranchers over the years. People who've built something from nothing, survived things that should have broken them, and came out on the other side with something worth passing down. At the same time, I also visit with ranchers weekly who are struggling, whether in a startup business or trying to turn around a failing one. They're tired and frustrated, and they're wondering if they're on the right track. That's what this show is about. I'm John Haskell, the host of Ranchonomics, the podcast dedicated to helping ranchers win at business. Ranchonomics Stories is where we go deeper with longer conversations that describe the journey behind the success we see today, the hard years, the turning points, and the lessons that only come from living it. I want these stories to inspire us to keep going even when it's hard, to remind us that success really is possible, to drown out the voices that say it can't be done, and to reinforce our resolve to keep going until we win. Welcome to Ranchonomics Stories. This is part 2 of an interview we started last week. If you haven't already, we encourage you to go back and listen to part 1, and we're going to take off from where we left off. So just out of curiosity, you see about a 2% reduction in breed up on cows. What did you see in terms of cow condition? I know you were very worried, just like I was the first time, about those cows just shrinking to bones. What did you actually see?
They're pretty much even by the time we get to calving. So they've had 2 months to catch up.
And you're calving in May.
Cows. We actually, the first few days, the 20th of April, try to be wrapped up mid-June. So basically the month of May. I would say when we wean those calves, those cows that we weaned off of are a half a condition score behind the dry cows. But it's a little bit, we balance the ration for the animal, right? So those cows with the calf at side are getting a considerably better ration than the dry cows. Dry cows, they might raise in that time of year for a month. And so it all balances out. The point being, we try not to let them drop below 4. We've had a couple of times we've gone and brought a cow in and pulled the calf off of, and we've had even more times where I should have gone and pulled the cow in and pulled the calf off.
But she's not adapted to our environment too. And that makes that decision really easy she leaves because there's, 600 others that are doing it just fine.
Right. But you also live in an area where you've got a lot of late season storm risk. And so, I'm like you. I hate to see a cow get thin even as late as March or April because you never know what's around the corner for the next 6 weeks. So you might not be able to look at them for a week. So that's a scary prospect if they're starting below a 4.
Yeah, which we're pretty spoiled about with that, the prospect of not seeing a cow for a week here. We're in a pretty tight area with lots of trees, so we can pretty much see cows daily. Even if it's a whiteout for a week, we can usually find our way to them. But
yeah, okay, all right, that's pretty cool. And then, so let's go back to calving for a minute. When did you start calving? April 20th. Have you always been calving there, or I meant to ask Scott this earlier? And
I think you need to ask April that.
That's the same thing.
No, we haven't always calved in April. And sometimes you wonder why the light doesn't come on a little sooner than it does. Because when we first got married, Scott and Dawn were definitely the partners, but Dawn had a full-time state job. So pretty much Scott and I were the two that were...
You were the calving crew, huh?
Yeah. And we brought cows in then that we were calving besides our own cattle. So basically, the first spring after we were married, our nightlife was meeting each other in the incubator, getting calves warmed up, and we'd meet each other because one or the other of us was out there every 2 hours, and it made for a long calving season. And then you'd lose calves just freezing to death. And it was so stupid to try to calve then, but that's why everybody did it. So that's the way we did it too.
It's the perfect description every time I see that. So, yep. So what pushed you to change? What made you see the light there?
Shannon?
Well, I was trying to think how that developed calving later. It, was that one Mike Smith that changed us, but it was maybe some of that going clear till June is like, no, not clear till June. But we could see some value in calving later. Well, Shannon, you might remember more about.
It was actually losing Olin because he always calved the heifers down at his place. And after he passed, we spent it's not that far, but a lot of time on the road. And I remember adding up the fuel that it cost us just to calve heifers down there. So we moved heifers. We're like, whoa, we could calve them here at our place. And then it started cascading.
Yeah. I remember calving cows in March. I don't remember calving them. I remember calving some heifers late February. So by the time I was old enough, they'd already moved to that time frame. And then, Mom gives me credit for changing it later. And that was actually more about the feed situation, because it's so much cheaper to feed a cow, green grass than it is to feed her hay. And so we bumped it a little bit later, and we calved the 1st of April for a while. And we had guys like Mike Smith, who is the range extension specialist at UW, in our ear, specifically my ear, but also Dad's every time you got a chance.
Really?
You got calving in June. You need to be calving in June. And at the same time, there was other guys around. We subscribed to Stockman Grass Farmer for years and years and years, and every other article in there for a while was about the benefits of calving in June. And I remember one of our strategy meetings, and maybe it was just a meeting coming and going from calving in the snowstorm and trying to warm calves up, but it was like, if we just move this a month later, it's going to be most of the same headaches, but it's going to save us, I think it was $20,000 in feed costs. So we're not gaining that much extra weight, and it's costing us feed. And so we pushed it to the 1st of May. And we did that for 10, 12 years. Mm-hmm. And then we've moved it back. And now we calve, our heifers are bred to calve the 10th of April. Cows are bred to calve the 20th of April. But the reason we backed it, we never did go to June, because even calving the 1st of May, we struggled to get cows bred, because 200 feet, essentially 45 days of growing season, you kick a bull in August, what's the Will Bank principle? They need to be on the gain when you turn the bull in. Well, you try to get a cow to gain on cured out June grass and some needle and thread in August. It's not happening.
And they haven't seen green grass for 6 weeks at that point, right? Unless they're on something irrigated. So,
and that's a whole, we tried that, John. We would come back to some of the used to be hay meadows, and we would graze those because it's still green. And that made things worse because we were changing their diet so much, and some other issues that was our learning curve. So anyway, we're trying to find an animal that's adapted to our climate. And people ask me, like, what would you do different if you had to do it over? I'd say, well, I'd forget about, creating a cow adapted to our environment. I'd go buy some buffalo and do it the easy way. And so when we look at this stuff, we kind of try to mimic some of the buffalo patterns. And what I found out is a bison calves when they need to, wherever they are. And so in South Texas, they might calve, and I want to say it's mid-March when they calve down there. In Montana, they're calving the 1st of May. And so you kind of think, well, maybe it's the 1st of May. Everybody's talking about calving with the wildlife, and they're talking about deer and antelope, and that's the 1st of June. Well, that's an entirely different species that's breeding in November and December.
Correct. Yeah, the gestation time matters on those. Yeah.
Yep. So finally figured out that bison native to our area calved the 3rd week of April.
Yeah, interesting.
And so we've been doing that for 3 years.
How did you find that out?
So you have your reading list ready? So 1491 by Charles C. Mann.
Oh, yeah.
Cattle Kingdom by Chris Knowles. And then there was one other book that talks a lot about Charles Goodnight, and I can't remember the name of that book.
Okay.
But you start reading that from a standpoint of trying to figure out what the bison are doing instead of what the cattle are doing, and you pick up. Yep.
It's funny because I don't remember that part of that book, so that's good. We'll have to look around.
Yeah. If that's not how it was, John, that's how it should have been. But I think those are the 3 books. Yeah. That's another grandpaism. And so we increased our conception rates by 3 to 5% consistently every year just by making that change.
You did. Now that's interesting. From late March, early April to late April, you increased.
No. The April, we decreased our conception rates.
Yeah.
Even from March to April, we decreased them.
Right,
Probably 10.
which is pretty common.
You don't go brag about it. No.
But you've taken a lot of cost out. You've made your life easier. You wind up with more live calves.
Yeah, you're profitable. You're just not as productive.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, going from May to April, mid-April calving.
Backing up to 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, that 10 days made a 3 to 5% change in conception rates. And that adds up pretty fast because it doesn't cost that much more in feed to feed a cow to calve late April than it does the 1st of May. It's essentially the same time.
Right. Tell me how you figure the difference in feed cost when you're making projections on this. I've often kind of gone back to like my February 1st caloric need. How do you think about that when you do that?
I go all winter long. If I understand the question right, I mean, I start balance the ration for November 1st. And when I'm balancing the ration, I'm usually trying to use alfalfa, and I'm calculating the alfalfa we buy per pound of protein.
So if it's 18% alfalfa, you're taking the total weight, multiplying by 0.18, and then carrying through. Yep.
We've bought dairy quality alfalfa because per pound of protein, it was a better deal than some of the beef quality hay that might have been $50 a ton cheaper.
And especially if you have to put it on a truck and take it anywhere, because if it's 25% protein, it's a lot cheaper to haul it around than 17, 16. How far do you guys have to go for alfalfa?
At least 90 miles. Riverton or Torrington is our closest.
He uses a program called Cowbites, Bytes, out of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets down to the nitty-gritty of how many months gestation, which is beneficial because we are feeding cows that are gestating late.
Yeah, right.
Lactating still.
Right.
And so, and it takes wind chill into consideration. So he is changing the ration month by month.
Yeah, great.
Based on each group's needs. So.
And these young guys use computers, whereas I get out an NRC and start working on it on a pad of paper. So, this is the modern age, right, buddy?
We're that interesting. We're the last of Gen X or the first of the millennials, but we're the last of Gen X because we are not the first of the millennials. But we learned how to do it.
To be very clear about this, but anyway, no offense to any millennials. Sorry.
But we went through college and we learned how to do it with pencil and paper. And then we quickly dropped that and went to the computer.
Good. Say the name of the program again.
Cowbites, Bytes.
Like computer bites. So,
Yep.
Excellent. Good. And there are a number of good options out there for doing ration balancing, and they are very valuable. I think over and over again, that is a tool, or that type of tool or working with a nutritionist can be very, very valuable.
If I didn't have an animal science degree, I think probably would go that route. We have a nutritionist that we work with anyway, but I try not to pay her any more than I have to.
Keep the overheads down.
That's right.
Yeah, same. Once you take graduate nutrition, then you kind of feel obligated to I have to do this. Sorry, I can't. I made all these spreadsheets in college for a reason. So very good. All right. Well, let's keep going forward. So that was the heifers. You've leased additional ground. You've stopped feeding that. What changes has that sort of brought as you've come forward with that program? Because you've been doing that for 10 years ish, right? 12 years. Yeah.
Dad, I'm just going to prompt you and I'm going to let you talk about it. You guys started AI in cows in 1975.
Yes.
And if you wanted to start there and come to where we are now, I think John would be interested in that.
Okay. Yes, I went to my AI school in 1975, and we started AIing some heifers and a few cows, and we'd spend 30 days heat detecting and AIing, and yeah, we could see some difference in genetics. We were able to use better genetics. April, I guess we got married next year. April went to an AI school about in 1978. And so we both AI'd cows, and somewhere along that line, we started synchronizing. So we started AIing a lot. Or all of our heifers when we were still, actually, after we went to the feedlot, we'd go over there and AI heifers. And so we did a lot of that. The synchronizing helped a lot. We feel like we improved our genetics a bunch. I remember we were, it was back then, it was all about what do you sell your cat? What was the weight of your calves when you sold them? The most I remember was our steer calves weighed 599 pounds when we sold them. Man, that was great. But with doing all that AI, we were seeing our cow size getting bigger all
Yep.
the time. So I started this trying to select too much milk. So I'm trying to select bulls with less milk, keep the growth down some. And so back when I was doing it, you think you had a good bull. So you'd breed a bunch of cows to this bull that whenever these heifers were developed, you found out they don't fit our program.
Yeah. Turns out it wasn't such a good bull, huh?
And so it was tough to find anything. And then after Shannon took that over, then he really struggled trying to find the right kind of genetics to fit our environment. And it was just tough to do, back to the same problem as you think you had the right bull and they didn't work out. So you just set yourself back another 3 years and just got to talking about it. We need to select more for our environment. When you're bringing these outside genetics in, you're going to have trouble doing that. And so we were very proud of our AIing that we did for, I used to keep track of it because I stacked hay with a tractor, stacking loose hay for the same amount of years as AI. And I kind of lost track at 25, maybe going on 30 years that we AI cows. And so
about 30. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, April and I are not getting any younger. And we did actually get down to time breeding on cows. So we would AI 250.
That speeded up a bunch.
Day.
Yeah.
And that helped. That helped too. But a lot of stress on people, a lot of stress on cattle. And finally, Shannon got brave enough. He can kind of take the story, but he came to us and says, "What do you think about not AIing anymore?" And I don't remember I said it quite like that, but I think he says, "Oh my God, I was wondering when you're going to ask when we're going to quit AI."
I've been waiting decades for somebody to ask this question.
We were definitely over it.
Yeah, we were then. But, I will have to say we built a good set of cows, but we did all we could. They were starting to go the wrong way. We were thinking more about our environment and meeting that. And it just made sense to start doing what we are doing now.
Yeah. So what are you doing now?
Go ahead, Shannon.
We're flirting with that line between inbreeding and line breeding. So Bert Teichert, 100% Bert Teichert philosophy. If a cow can calve in the first 21 days, her first 3 seasons, she has the ability to raise a bull for us. If we never have to touch her, other than to run her through the chute to give her a vaccine, she can raise a bull for us. If she doesn't put Melinda on the fence, then she can raise a bull for us. And so that's the first cut. And then the second cut is, do they look like they're going to make a decent bull? And then if they can make it through that one, we'll DNA sample those and send them and find out, make sure they're homozygous black, homozygous polled. And then look at we had a lot of trouble when we pulled all the crutches out from underneath these heifers, which included feeding them to 800 pounds, 900 pounds in the feedlot, AIing and calving through the barn and whatnot. When we pulled those crutches out from underneath them, we found out we had leaving them on the cow, for 10 minutes and then taking advantage of compensatory growth. Those heifers are now weighing 800 when they're calving instead of when they're breeding. And we had a dystocia problem. And so the DNA, we really focused on calving ease direct and calving ease maternal for our bulls. And really, we pretty much, we still pull 4 to 5%.
I was going to say, we were at 25%, probably at our highest pull rate for those heifers. And now we're down to, 2 to 6%, depending on the year.
We're to a point now where we feel good enough about it that we've started to focus more on some of the other important ones like stability, heifer pregnancy. We try not to let the growth traits go too far, like creep down too much. Or
yeah, you can definitely get too small, too little growth, right?
Yeah. So we're raising about, I'm just going to say 20 bulls each year. And we'll keep half of those for ourselves, and then we'll sell the other half to some of these sell-by guys like John Haskell.
I was going to say, I think I've been the proud owner of a couple of these. So
yeah, and actually, I think it works out pretty good. We sell them cheap because they are not the ones that make the cut for us, and people know that. But I think they're still performing better than some other bulls out there because they have. When you grow up in McFadden, Wyoming, like you can survive anywhere.
It's downhill everywhere but the North Pole. Yes.
Yep.
So that's kind of where we are now.
And we raise them super cheap too. We don't have anything into them except for grass and some hay after they're weaned, because they stay on the cow till 10 months too. So, we don't have to sell them for very much to make a pretty good profit on them.
Yep. And you do those all private treaty, right?
So far.
Yeah, awesome. And I believe you have a website if we want to plug that here real quickly.
Oh, you're going to let us, yeah.
Oh, please.
www.simscattlecompany.com.
All right. SIMS Cattle Company. Good.
Yes.
All right. Awesome. What else? What have we got? Well, I mean, we're kind of up to the present day. Oh, I know. I want to talk to you. You mentioned haying a bunch. Let's talk about your meadow management. You had mentioned haying and fertilizer a bunch when we started this conversation.
Fertilizer, yes. Go ahead, Dad.
I was thinking that because we went back to talking about with all this fertilizing, we were seeing that we're developing this monoculture of creeping meadow foxtail, excuse me.
Also known as Garrison, yes.
So we go out with our range monitoring and we look at the ground and what we see there. Then we go look at these meadows where we've been fertilizing, and oh my God, there's no life there. And so it's bothering us what we're doing. And then you read about the long-term effects of fertilizer and soil aging. And so this is back before we lost Olin. If I remember right, we set a goal that we would not spend more than $30,000 on fertilizer. And $30,000 used to fertilize our whole place. It didn't take long until we got down to where we could only fertilize a fourth of the place. And we decided, okay, we're going to just pull the plug. We're going to quit fertilizing. So, it has, if you look at it just from an economic standpoint, of course, I don't know the price of fertilizer now. I don't know, but it'd be more economical to fertilize. But we look at it from the long-term health of the land and survivability of this operation. And so we decided just to quit it. So we've seen a transition in the meadows, less production, but has come back with more diversity. We'll never have the same production that we had with the fertilizer, but the quality is so much better.
And for anybody that's not familiar with Garrison creeping meadow foxtail, it cures pretty low quality. It's not quite as bad as reed canary grass, but it's in that same kind of general order where it'll cure like straw.
Oh, definitely.
Right now, so we're, what's today, the 9th of July, and I'll bet the stuff they're cutting today is going to be 8 to 9% crude protein. And if we don't get any rain in the next 2 weeks, it'll be 4 to 5.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's not a joke. It does produce volume, but there's not a lot of feed value to it. So, yeah, good. All right, keep going, Scott.
And we still have lots of Garrison Creek meadow foxtail. In fact, we look at that as like, we're going to have it. We're never going to get rid of it. Do we ever want to necessarily? But we just try to manage with it. And it, if we have to buy some supplement to go with it, then that's what we do. But we're not going to just feed the Garrison.
Yeah, good. And so when you feed they're eating Garrison and alfalfa, correct?
Whatever the ration requires, that's what we do. Yes, you bet. And so these guys go through and sample every meadow. So, and then set up a grazing plan to run these cattle through, not only on our stacked hay, but also our windrowed hay.
Good. And we haven't gotten to your windrows yet, so that's another piece to include.
Yes. Do you want to talk about windrows?
If you're asking me, I'd love to. Yes, please.
Going back to, this would have been whenever we leased the place back in 1991. Like I say, we were putting up 2,500 ton of hay. We had the opportunity to lease this other ranch, which added another 700-800 acres of ground to hay. And like, oh my God, do we really want to be haying more? But then at the same time, been hearing about some people, Greg Simons, doing some windrow grazing at Deseret Ranch. And
I've heard
what
of
they
it.
did in there, we decided that it just would be an opportunity to try that. And so we actually hired a rancher from out north of Medicine Bow, brought his equipment over and on the shares. he baled half of it and took home and left the rest in windrows for us. And that's where we started. Along with that ranch, we went in on those big meadows, weren't fenced down very much, put in some more permanent type electric fence. And so it just worked great with those windrows. We could go in with a temporary fence and just block them off into 4 or 5 day, probably no more than 5 day moves at a time, go through that. And we've been doing that since the early 90s and haven't quit. And people, the first question always is, so does it blow away? Oh, no, it might blow over against the willows or something, but it's pretty amazing how those windrows will stay intact. Now, I do know there's people, I've talked to someone from Montana and they said, no, we cannot make windrows. They will blow away. So it's something that's worked for us. Shannon's got probably the economic figures along with that, but it has simplified our winter operation so much. I used to go feed all morning, feed all morning, and then in the afternoon you get a little bit done, and then you go feed again. And then over the years, it's like April says, the light finally came on. Geez, we're spending all this time putting this hay in a stack and then we're taking it all back out. So this, with the windrow, I think we try for 2/3 of our grazing or our winter feed needs to be with windrows at least, and just use the stack stuff during the spring when we're calving.
And just for anybody that doesn't know, how many windmills can you see from your house, or closer to the 3 restaurants? How many windmills would be in that 22-mile radius that those same 3 restaurants are included in?
I think the better question is how many tipped over semis there are within 5 miles. It's several.
Semis have a bad tendency to fall asleep on that stretch of I-80, don't they? So, just to give anybody else a picture, they live in an incredibly windy area, and you guys are, especially where your meadows are, our little shelter down in the bottom. But I mean, that part of Wyoming is very windy. And the other really cool advantage your meadows have, I think, for windrows is that when they dry out, they're pretty much dry, right? You don't have problems controlling water on them late summer. So when you do lay down a windrow, it doesn't get wet from the bottom. And that garrison is amazing for its ability to sort of pack itself down in those little windrows and stay pretty tight and resist the wind and resist all kinds of other stuff. I think elk are a bigger problem than wind, but
those windrows are almost like, when you buy the mattress and they deliver to the door and you take the off, you open those up in the wintertime. It's kind of the same deal.
Your purple mattress in a bag when you pop the bag and it throws you against the wall.
Yeah, except for this is green. Well, mostly
usually.
Green. Yeah. The economics on that, it costs us about a third of the cost to make windrows as it does to make a bale. And we use contractors, so we don't have all the overheads of owning the machinery and everything. And so it's about a third.
Are you raking your windrows? You're basically you're swathing them and then you rake 2 together, right? And then leave them to settle.
We use a disc mower, so they're not even swathed. So it dries fast. And then we have a 10-wheel rake. And it's not the most economical way to do it, but it also allows us or her to make as many passes as she needs to make a good windrow. So you don't have all these little, tubes out there that are just going to blow away or rot away.
Lose quality,
Yeah. And I have to say, too, Dad was talking about the, dropping fertilizer from our program and what that did ecologically. Economically, right now, with the way cattle prices are, we could run almost twice as many cows if we fertilized the whole ranch with the current cost of fertilizer. And we choose not to. That costs us about $350,000 right now. We're leaving that much money on the table because 3 years ago, when the cattle prices weren't here, it would cost us $150,000 to make that much more hay. And ruin our ecology for a blip in the market at the high, it's not worth it.
Yeah. The cost savings at the bottom are worth a lot more than the extra production at the top.
Yep.
Yeah, very good. There was something else I wanted to ask you about windrows. Oh, let's talk about the difference between windrowing it versus just leaving it standing, because this is another thing that's interesting to garrison especially. What do you guys see as far as animal days per acre or however you measure it? What's your production off those windrowed meadows versus, meadows that you just left feed stand on?
Yeah, I usually figure about 50 to 75% harvest efficiency of grazing versus making the windrows, which is huge. And then add to that, the real make or break point, though, is the protein. Because we're talking about, if we don't get rain, it'll be 4 to 5. If we do get rain, it'll be 6 to 7.
Yeah.
But by the time November comes around, we're talking 1 to 3%.
Yeah. If you're assuming a percent loss each month, that's a pretty bad January feed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we can harvest that hay right now, put it into a windrow, it holds its quality almost as good as a bale. So if we're holding it at 7 to 7.5% right now and don't have to put supplement with it versus grazing it at 1 to 3 at a 50% harvest efficiency and adding
lots of protein,
especially a year like this where they're just not growing that much alfalfa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about a breakthrough. That is definitely 10x.
Yeah. That's cool. And then I'm assuming on your meadows, you're on your better meadows, you're probably 200 animal days ish on the windrows. No, what does that look like on yours?
Our best meadows are 100 animal days, and we'll go ahead and make swaths on. This is where you and Sewell would have laughed at us when you were still down at the TA. 50 animal days, we'll still make hay.
Yeah.
Once it drops below that, then it's grazing, and we'll try to graze those October, November. I always wanted to push till Christmas. This is one of those like young and dumb, and everybody's like, the further into winter you can graze, the more profitable you'll be, and push that to Christmas. And man, it's hard on cattle. And so now it's even mid-November, and we just go to the swaths. But then what we'll do is in late February even, but typically the 1st of March, we'll go back to those and graze again because there's just enough green coming up and the lichen broke down in that old feed enough that it actually makes a pretty good ration. We don't have to put so much protein with it if we have to put any with it. There was some guy that he said that they did that in the Nebraska Sandhills. Yeah, it kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know what's interesting about going and back and grazing after done with the windrows is the cows told us about that. A couple different occasions. We're moving cows off windrows to a meadow where we're going to start feeding them hay.
Yeah.
And they put their heads down and start grazing, and we couldn't hardly move them. So with just watching what those cows would do, I think we ended up picking up about 30 days of grazing in the spring, done with the windrows, just rotating back through again.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really interesting. Well, what have we missed, guys? Is there anything we haven't covered yet?
So, yes, John, one thing I think we need to talk about is drought management.
Excellent. Good.
Yes. And back about the time I was born, they were having a pretty good dry spell here. And my dad well remembers that because they had to leave cows on the meadow. And they used some electric fence then, but they didn't have any grass. And it was tough. There was a lot of feed from wherever was hauled in. Government programs, cake come in, whatever. It stuck with them. So through the years, we're rolling along, doing good. We'd have a dry year, and Dad would say, "You boys never saw what it was like back in the 50s." And we were like, "Well, yeah, but we are selling a lot of hay, so probably we would not sell hay." And so that would probably get us through. But the neat thing about that, every time Dad would bring that up, we get rain and we'd be okay. And that, you know what I'm saying? It worked.
Oh, yeah.
Because he'd start worrying and then it'd rain up until 2002. And it got
dry. Which was a bad year.
It got dry, and it didn't matter what Dad said, it didn't. And we didn't sell any hay, but we didn't have enough hay to feed the cattle that we had. So of the 500 and some cows we're running, we sold about, if I remember right, 125 cows to help us get through. And so we were able to get through that. But it was an eye-opener for darn sure. We need to do some better planning as far as drought management. So we had been hearing different ones talking about leaving pasture in reserve every year. You ought to be leaving at least 10%. I'm trying to think who the guy up in Montana that would rest you know who it is, rest the pasture for three years or something.
Is that Ray Bannister?
Ray Bannister.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we came up with our own plan. And so we decided to start, well, at the same time, and Shannon mentioned it earlier, we had an opportunity to do some grazing on the WIC unit up on Wagon Hound with Game and Fish. And we'd sold some cows, but then we gained some pasture up there. And so it allowed us to leave a third of our pastures rest. So that was going to be our reserve, and it worked well. You know, we didn't use the pasture for a whole year, and so we were seeing healthier plants and more litter on the ground. We did that for a few years. I remember in 2012 it was dry, and so we used all those pastures. We got through. We didn't have to sell cows, but we used all those pastures to get through. And I think again in 2013 we had to graze all the pastures again, but we kept our cows together. 2014 came along, and it was not only wet that year, but remember what calf prices were then?
Oh, yeah.
So, yes.
It was a good year to have cows and have calves to sell.
We had our whole cow herd intact, and so I don't remember the numbers on that now, but it made us a lot of money having that drought plan.
Was 14 or 15 the first year we sold $1,500 steers?
I think it was 14.
I think it was too. And I think 15 was a little off of that. And
it was good too, but a little off of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a wonderful year to have cows. You know, most people had destocked. We'd had a terrible drought all through the South Plains. It started really, I think, in 10 and 11, continued through 12. And then we got slammed really hard in 12. And there was a lot of places that were in trouble by the time the 1st of August came around.
Yeah. Shannon, I don't know if this is an opportunity to talk about our change in our grazing management now as far as our drought reserve.
Yeah. So like Dad said, after 2002, it was an eye-opener, and we implemented that 800 days of rest on a third of the pastures.
Yeah.
And kept the rotation going. And we saw some pretty good, we've got monitoring data. We have 9 different rangeland transects that Melinda reads every year, and then we put it through a computer program and it reads it for us. We saw improvements, especially in our bare ground. Our bare ground was going down, and then our litter and our grass species were going up for a while. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of plateaued. And so...
Well, and on top of that too, we were running our original number of cows on 2/3 of the ranch.
Yep.
So we were gaining animal days too, a lot more for.
Yeah. But we kind of felt like we got stale. We just stagnated. We weren't growing the herd anymore, or couldn't grow the herd anymore. Bare ground was kind of staying where it was. And so, and I think it was like several years we're kicking around like, what's next? What's the next strategy? We're always doing something different. And it took a while, but back to those 3 books and studying the bison, and I've got a friend, one of our neighbors, he worked for a bison ranch over at Wheatland, Wyoming, and got to talking to him about bison behavior. And what we've kind of decided to try is mimicking what we think they did prior to 1491, because that's different than 1880, right, or 1850. Those bison would migrate a little bit, but not a whole lot. And they would graze an area until it was almost too much. And then they would move to a rested area, clean it up, and then they would work on it for a while. And so I don't think we ever would have implemented it if artificial intelligence had to come along about the same time, because it got very complicated very fast. But the new program now is we're going to do, I believe it's 3 years of rest, 3 growing seasons of rest. So like, what are we, 26, 27, 28, a pasture will be rested. And then the next 4 years, it'll get grazed. Because what we're seeing is we're just not getting enough biomass accumulated on the surface to really cover the soil like we want to get that good. Back in the old days of HMI, it was litter 2, right? You had 1 layer of litter was good. Yeah. The second layer was better if you started a thatch. Yeah. And that's where we feel like we're missing out. So that's the new endeavor. And what's exciting about that is the carbon credit companies and what they're doing now, we're looking to be able to, we haven't pulled the trigger yet, but we're looking to be able to measure the soil carbon with that management change. So beyond just our surface monitoring, we can start underground
Deeper.
too. So
Cool. That's neat.
That's what's coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're excited.
So just real quickly, as you've changed through the grazing systems, if you will, how has it affected the stocking rate? So, leaving a quarter of your pastures and not grazing them every year sounds like a lot. I realize what the effect is in the drought year that you don't have to destock, but how's the effect in the other years? Are you running the same number of cows, just doing it on fewer acres?
And that's what Melinda pointed out. It's the same number of cows on fewer acres. And then in a drought year, it's the same number of cows.
You're right. You have to increase. Right.
Yeah, we have to use more coverage. But I remember you on a podcast with Clay Connery talking about we can store grass west of the hundreds, and we can absolutely store grass here. We're 12 to 15 inch precip.
Right.
And
nothing route
would be 6 to 12 inches tall anyway. So even with our winds, it's not blowing it over. So we can store grass here and still have some quality to it, even 2 or 3 seasons later.
Good. And going back a second, I meant to ask you about your weaning weights and how they changed with your calving date, because that was another one I'm a big student of. I'm very interested in how that works.
They went down. Let's new topic, John.
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
Okay. Oh, interesting. All right. How much did they go down?
Help me out here, Dad. We were selling calves on the video back in the 80s and 90s, and I think you were putting those in at 5 weights, right? Or were they 550s?
You mentioned a peak of $5.99.
April just said $5.50. I do remember one time we sold them weighing 5 for $1. That's, I don't know just when that was, but they're at that time 5, but a lot of times $5.50. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's October 25th delivery, essentially.
Yeah. On a March, April born calf.
Yeah. And so now we're consigning 400-pound calves for October 25th delivery. And I think in one time,
1 year.
In 1 year since 2010, we had to actually worry about a slide. Generally, they're not making 400.
Same genetics?
Well,
we closed our herd in 2020, so yes and no.
Yeah.
We haven't brought in any new genetics since then. But
yeah. Okay. All right. That's interesting. That's a pretty big drop. I've talked to lots of people from cold climates, and this was our experience on the TA. Weaning weights basically stayed the same, and we moved calving date back 30 to 60 days.
Yeah, and that's why I joke, because we'll talk about anything, but that's why I joked that I didn't want to talk about it, because that was not our experience. But we're doing so many other things at the same time. Like, was it just the calving date, or was it because we supplement differently? Was it because we are leaving these calves on longer? Was it because we're
inbreeding depression?
Right.
I'm totally kidding.
What's the difference in dollars between a 400 weight calf and a weight calf?
This is actually the most important question here, because sometimes it's 0, and sometimes they give you more for the 4 weight and down on I-8 meanwhile. So what have you guys seen for the difference? What are your thoughts there?
I think last year it was about $100 a head.
Okay.
Difference.
Yeah.
The heavier calf being worth more.
Yep.
And prior to that, I don't think there was a difference, was there? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, it's really close.
There are lots of years where it's $25 or less, plus or minus. Yeah.
So it's worth not having to get up at night to calve, frozen calves and all that. It all works out. And I mentioned that about reaching $5.99 on those calves, but now we're back to $400. But you look at the big picture and the economics, and no, I would trade where we are today for anything.
Yep. Yeah, that's fantastic. Good. All right. What else should we talk about while we're all together? This has been a wonderful conversation, guys. Should we talk about the 5th generation, since Kagan was in the room as our tech support getting us started?
Yeah, you got to see Kagan's role. This is Kagan's role. Is he's the mechanic, he's the IT guy, he's
help Grandpa and Grandma with their computer when they got to do a podcast interview. I like it. It's a good role.
Yeah. Careful how I put this, but when he came back to the ranch, he moved into the house that Melinda and I were living in. And then we brought in a new house, and we were like a half mile away from headquarters now. And what I used to always tell everybody is I moved out of my mom's house when I was 17 years old, but I still haven't moved out of her yard. I finally moved out of her yard and let Kagan take over all the helping.
That's great. Good. Everybody needs a pool boy, right?
That's right. There's just one big point, and it's not even a point. There's just a statement I want to make as it pertains to Kagan and succession and past successions and whatnot. And we teach ranching for profit, and we're around a lot of people that have done succession well. And everybody, just like they're grazing, everybody's got a recipe for how to do succession right. And what I found is everybody's recipe works really well for them. And so when you stand in front of a classroom of people and you're telling them, don't bring the next generation back too soon, that's a really easy statement to make until you have a next generation to bring back. And then what does too soon mean? And so I spent a lot of time talking with Dallas Mount and talking with John Locke about Kagan, and they really pushed me not to bring him back right out of college, to let him go get 5 to 10 years of experience somewhere else. At the same time, I've got some close friends that were telling me, like, dude, if he wants to be there, bring him in. Like, why would you let him go do something else? I think mom and dad were kind of, whichever way it goes, they wanted to see him back. And so I was struggling with this question big time. We all were struggling with it. My grandpa, Don, had a meeting or an appointment of some kind in Laramie. And I can't remember what the circumstances were, because it's not like I helped out with his healthcare very often. But whatever happened, I gave him a ride home from Laramie. And so I remember it like it was yesterday, because it was just a couple of years ago. But we're driving down Highway 30 between Rock River and Bosler, where all the, magic always happens. I was just kind of vetting this situation with Grandpa, and I wanted his input because he had come back to a situation with his dad where they didn't get along. And then he and my dad, before Dad finished college, and allowed him to come in and told him that he was disappointed in him, but never stopped learning, right? And so he'd seen that part of it. Him and Dad brought in my uncle, and there was some issues with that were hard to resolve. And I don't know if Dad wants to talk about that. I'll leave that up to him, but that wasn't just a slam dunk. We're bringing the next generation in. When I came in, Dad and Olin and Grandpa and Mom, I remember all four of them saying at different points, like, you're always welcome on the ranch. You're just not going to be here without a degree. And that worked out really well for me, because I met my wife that way. Otherwise, I'm not sure I really used the degree. But
it's hard to meet people at all the restaurants in McFadden, isn't it?
Right.
There isn't a lot of traveling public that stops off.
Yeah, and the facade fell down across the front door of the bar in Rock River, so even harder. So anyway, I wanted Grandpa's input. Oh, another one that I knew he had experienced is one of our neighbors' sons was the same age as Grandpa, and when that neighbor's dad passed away, the son had told Grandpa, he said, well, this really screwed up my plans, because he had a whole career planned out for himself. But when Dad died, he had to go back to the ranch and didn't really want to be there. And that left an impression on Grandpa. And he told me that story several times. So anyway, I kind of told him, the different outlooks and everything else. And Grandpa, like he would, he kind of sat there and he took it all in, and he did something I'm still working at getting good at, but he took about 15 seconds and just didn't say anything. And then he looks at me and he goes, if a kid doesn't want to be on the ranch and they feel obligated to be there, he said, that's just wrong. Let's go do something else. He said, if a kid wants to be part of your business, to be a part of your ranch, and you hold them off, that's bull crap. And it was my grandpa, so he didn't say crap.
He didn't say crap, yeah.
And just in that two sentences, like it gave me a lot of clarity, right? Too soon is if a kid wants to go get experience somewhere else and hasn't got the experience they need, it's too soon. But if the kid has the ability to fill the role that you have and wants to be there, it's time to bring him in. And so Kagan got 4 years of college, and, he worked for the university while he was there. He's done day work for some other operations. and it was not too soon with him. And so I think that's the important part, and that's the legacy that I think we've all kind of decided we want to leave, or not leave, that Grandpa's left, along with the open-mindedness, is read the kid and meet them where they're at. And who knows if it's going to work out.
Yeah, more to come, right? We'll do this interview again in 10 years and see where we're at.
See where we're at. Dad's had to step in verbally, pull us apart once or twice, right? And that's only in the first year, but we'll work through that.
Yeah.
So
good.
It might happen with the generation before too.
I might have got fired once. I don't know.
These things happen. Occasionally things escalate.
I mentioned that Granddad and Dad could not get along, ranch together, but we were able to work something out. And Granddad Roy, he was an ornery booger in his day, but April remembers his being a really sweet old man. And he was really, but it's just a generation thing. Maybe that's the way it was back in the day. But Dad learned from his experience with his dad. I got along great with Dad. We had our differences, but
not very often.
No, not very often. He was very open-minded, and we give you a chance to express yourself, and we talk. He was always there. Both of my parents were great about listening. And so we've kind of taken that. April and I went to, which was a school through HRM. It was called Families and Business. And it just talked about people. And there was a lot of people, families there that they were fighting. They sat down at the table with each other for a long time, and they were at the table then, learning how to communicate. That was pretty powerful for us to experience that. It made me appreciate my dad a lot more, and just helped us with the ability of communicating. It's not always easy, but we know what the end goal, what we want it to be, and work towards that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I'll tell you, being around you over the years, it's always impressed me how well you all get along. I know that doesn't mean that you all just agree on everything, but the story you told about your grandfather saying, well, I think it's a terrible idea, but let's try it. Like, that's what a great attitude, right? I mean, that's pretty hard to fight against. And if it doesn't go right, you probably don't feel like you need to prove him wrong, right? You probably think, well, I guess Grandpa was probably right. So we'll move on. Okay, well, a couple of the things you guys have talked about that are kind of really stand out is this, real commitment to continued learning. I think that's a huge piece of what you guys are still doing, but it's impressive to me that you've been doing it, from the 50s, right? That drought experience you were describing and then making sure you're prepared for that is pretty amazing. The two things that you've talked about that go together to me also is your family's tradition of listening to each other and then monitoring the landscape. To me, those are very similar, right? But looking for feedback and what is actually going on, trying to be observant, see those things, and then going on from there and trying stuff and experimenting with them. I'm sure there are other things we didn't talk about that you've tried that haven't worked, but you've been willing to get out of the status quo and try stuff. And sometimes that's the hardest thing in the world to do. And just last, like we just talked about, I always admire families that get along, because that is not the normal case. And it's never easy. Nobody wants to live in their mom's yard for the rest of their life and be told what to do by their dad, right? That is no one's ambition. And that's not the way it works in your case. But, there are so many places where we can be sensitive about things that have happened over the decades as we've known each other. And you guys do a great job of, working together as adults. And I think you have a pretty regular meeting structure. Is that right? That is one thing we didn't cover. You guys meet regularly together, have business meetings, right?
Melinda kind of touched on it. And regular business meeting, define regular. We have business meetings, but what we actually have is more of strategy. We call them strategy meetings. Some people call them Monday morning meetings. It depends on the time of year. Right now, we're doing it once every 3 weeks because we're haying.
Yeah.
If things are not going to change that much.
Yeah.
We were 3 weeks prior just because scheduling didn't allow it. Mm-hmm. But that really has been a game changer just for everybody to have a chance to get out there, what is on their plate, what they need help with, and be heard. And we're very intentional about going around the room and everybody gets a chance to talk. right? And get everything out. So it's not just one big conversation. It's actually everybody gets a chance. It's happened today, John. Just sitting back watching this, Dad and I did most of the talking. And it's pretty natural. Dad and I like to talk, and these guys are a little bit more reserved. But when it comes time for that strategy meeting, these guys have amazing input. And if we don't force ourselves to shut up once in a while, we don't get very far. And I think that goes to what you were just talking about with putting the monitoring and the listening together. It's just listening. If you can listen to a cow, Dad talked about listening to a cow. It'll tell you so much about what her nutritional needs are, what you need to do to get her to go through that gate, what you need to do to be better for the land that she's standing on. And you can listen to a cow. People are really easy to listen to.
Usually.
I didn't know that. That's true. I think that's true. But again, it's the same skill set, right? I mean, if you're paying attention, being observant is to my mind a critical skill of being in the cow business. It's a critical skill to being a good range manager, right? It's a skill for being a good nutritionist. Like those things really matter. So yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And then beyond the strategy meetings, we do have business meetings. We kind of got away from having budget meetings because it was just that got to be my role to do the budget and everybody to approve it. But when Kagan came back into the business with his fiance, we started having budget meetings.
Again. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of that, it's the season of life that we're in.
Yep. Yeah, that's fantastic. Melinda, April, Scott, you want to add anything?
I think we've covered most of it.
I want to add one thing. You're not going to want to use this, but Shannon was talking about he and I like to talk, which he likes to talk more than I do. But
I can rank you all. Don't worry. It's okay.
One time, the owner of Buckhorn, I want to say Bighorn, Buckhorn Bar. The owner of the Buckhorn Bar called and asked if he could bring some ladies out here from South Korea because they wanted to talk to, and he grew up here at McFadden, so I knew him anyhow. And so he came out with these ladies, and we sit out here in our sun porch. So they did have one of them could speak English, so they had a translator. And so they were talking, and I was answering questions, and then pretty soon they started talking in South Korean, back and forth. And finally, what they said was they wanted me to shut up and let April talk.
Oh, that's okay.
What they wanted to know, they were fascinated by women in ranch life.
Yep.
Here in America is what it was about. So they really wanted to talk to her.
And I'm not
cool.
here, so it was interesting.
Yeah, that's all right. Very good. Well, thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate you doing this. This, I think, is our officially going to be our longest one. So this is great, but such a fantastic story. And we got 2 generations in one. So that justifies excess length. But like I say, you guys do a fantastic job down there in a pretty hard part of the world. And it's really cool to see how things have evolved in the time since I've known you, which is more than 10 years now. It's been really neat to see how things just continue to improve, continue to grow and change. And it really proves this idea that, getting better at ranching is never done, right? We just continue to work at it, and there's always something else to work on. So thank you very much for joining me, and look forward to visiting more with you.
Yeah, this is fun, John. Thank you, John.
You bet. Thanks for tuning in to Ranchonomics Stories. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please share it with a friend or family member who you think would find it helpful too. Be sure to subscribe and follow the show so you don't miss next week's story.